Okay, here's my attempt at showing everyone how to do this radial spirally effect. Apologies if you can hear everyone in Leicester in the background. They're trying to make me laugh. What you want to do first of all, I tend to find this is the easiest shot on signature because you get a nice clean, crisp white background. So clean all your background up first. There's so many different ways of selecting the subject, but I typically do it by going to up here. Where are we? Sorry. Up here, go to select and then subject. That will give you a pretty decent selection of the subject. You can then go into this more closely and start looking at the bits like in between the fingers or around the hair using the magic wand tool. But I've done that already just to save a bit of time. On a separate canvas, make yourself a new canvas. I sized it to 10 inches by 15 inches at 250 DPI, and that will give you a pretty standard venture-sized canvas. What you need to do, I've done this already. Up here, there's normally a padlock. If you click on the padlock, and that's gonna open up your base layer to turn it into a normal layer. Double click here, and that's gonna open up your different layer styles. What you need to do is go to gradient overlay. You can obviously through this bit here, go into here and start selecting or color picking a certain color from the actual image that you're gonna use. I've got this preset based on the image that I'm gonna use anyway, but it can always be changed later as well. Your blending mode needs to be normal. Your opacity needs to be 100%. You need to have reverse clicked, but do not line with layer, so reverse. You need your layer style to be radial. You want an angle of around about 30 degrees, but again, that can all be changed later on as well. And your scale, have a little play around with it, but I tend to use anything between 110 and 130, something like that. It can actually look quite good at 150 as well, so have a little play around with that. I'm gonna use 150 actually. There you've got your gradient, okay? Take your image, and push V, and then basically just drag this over here. Get rid of this. And now we've got this here. I'm just gonna ask Lewis or someone to hold this for me because I can't do everything with just one hand.
Yeah, I'm right here, yeah. Is this how it works? All right, sorry.
So get your person sized how you want them to be. About like that. On your subject layer, push M to give yourself a marquee tool, and you want to select basically or make a really thin selection of that image. So I'm going to try and get as many different things in that image as possible and make myself a really thin marquee tool selection. Lewis, can you zoom in on that? So if you can see that I've got a really thin selection just there, okay? Take that back. Thank you, mate.
All right.
What you want to do, whilst you're still on your selection layer, you want to Control J to make basically put that marquee selection on a different layer, and you need to transform that. So Control T, and then holding Shift and Alt, you can then start to pull your pixels like this. That's it, and just select that. Then what you want to do is drag this to the top of your canvas and then do that one more time, maybe even on a different part of your image. So again, back onto your subject layer, get your marquee tool and do it again. I'm going to use a similar area, but it's quite cool if you select somewhere slightly different as well, like hair or shoes or something like that. And again, you want to create a new layer for this marquee tool, or this marquee selection. So again, Control J, and then you want to transform that. So Control T, hold Shift and Alt, and then you're going to drag it to the edges of the canvas. Like that, and select. Okay, now just bump this up to your previous effect here. So back over to your layers, you need to select each of those things that you've just made, select them both, so by pushing Shift and select layers 2 and 3 in my case, and then Control E is going to merge those layers together. Now this is what you need to do. This is really important. You need to then crop your canvas so that none of the bits, at the moment, all these effects are poking off the edge of the canvas, even though you can't see them. So you go to your crop tool, make your selection and crop. So that means there's nothing poking off the edge of the canvas now. Now the fun bit, go to filter, go to distort, go to polar coordinates. And that's going to give you a pretty cool circular kind of effect, okay? Push OK, and you've got this quite cool funky spinny thing. Before you do anything else, you need to select that and you just want to transform it because it tends to give you a slightly oval type shape rather than a perfect circle. So Control T to transform, hold Shift and drag it until you're happy with the shape. I tend to do it by eye, but you can do it by looking at the actual coordinates that pop up when you're transforming it as well. So I'm going to make it a bit smaller. I'm pretty happy with that. You want to then put your spiral beneath the subject, so the boy now jumps to the top. And we might want to make our boy a bit bigger so he's got certain parts poking off the edge of the canvas, off the edge of the spiral. So let's say we're happy with...
Hello, is that Janet?
Let's say we're happy with that.
Yeah, I'm just calling you from Venture Studios, just about a Facebook competition that you're in.
What you want to do is go back onto your spiral and you just want to spin it so that the join that you can see here is hiding behind a part of your subject. So in my case, the boy's head, I'm going to hide the join, okay? Right, then back onto your subject, we need to create some shadow, no we don't, sorry. What we want to do, we want to create a layer mask on our spiral, okay? So onto your spiral, layer mask, select your brush tool, and you're going to mask out part of that spiral. In this case, I'm going to mask out, probably use a harder brush, I'm going to mask out this part of him here. That is like that. Let's say, for example, you're happy with that, and obviously just have a play with whatever image you're doing. It will work in different ways for different images. We want to then create a little bit of shadowing. So we've got back onto our subject, double click on our subject. That's going to bring up our layer styles. Go to drop shadow. And generally speaking, you want to be on linear burn. Lewis, if you zoom in as much as you can on this, we want to be on linear burn on a black shadow, obviously. You want your opacity to be about 20%. Typically, I use an angle of about 50%, but again, it depends on your image and where you want the shadows to be. In fact, looking at this one, I might go... Yeah, so just have a play around with this and see where you want your shadows to be, basically. Your distance set to 40 pixels, your size set to 20 pixels, and your spread set to 0. You want to be on a straight contour like this, and the noise needs to be 0. And then, okay, that's given us a drop shadow around our subject. We then want to take away any shadow detail that we can see on the background as opposed to the spiral, if that makes sense. So you see up here, you've got drop shadow, right click, and you want to create a layer of that drop shadow. So you're basically going to create layer. So again, that's right click where it says drop shadow and then create layer. That's created us a layer for our drop shadow. We're going to make a layer mask on that drop shadow layer. And again, using our brush tool, we just want to kind of zoom in and get rid of any bits of shadow that we don't want, because he wouldn't typically be casting a shadow on the background. So around his hair, for example. And I'll do this quite quick for the sake of the video. Okay. That essentially is it. Any little bits of tidying up or neatening up, yeah, by all means, but that's basically it. What I tend to find looks quite cool as well is if you kind of ground it a little bit by giving a shadow underneath the boy or underneath your spiral. Best way to do that is to go to your layer 0 or your basically your background layer. Create a new layer with a little plus symbol here. Go to your brush tool. You want it on as soft as you can, but on 100 opacity, on black, and just put a spot like that. Transform that, Control T, And again, holding shift, bring it down a little bit, and shift and alt, you're just gonna basically create yourself a bit of a shadow like that. Put that somewhere that makes sense. It doesn't look great on this one, but that looks okay. I might make that a little bit bigger. So again, just bring it out a little bit. And that's pretty hard, so I'd probably go to that layer and bring the opacity down, I reckon to about 30%, but again, whatever you think looks right. And that essentially is how to go about making it. You can get quite creative with your colours and what parts of the selection you make, and again, trial and error, and it can be pretty quick. Hope that helps.